friends, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my Romantasy readathon reading vlog. Excuse my tripod moving, my cat is obsessively rubbing against it. I am very excited for this week of reading fantasy romance. I will leave the hosts information down below. There's quite a many of them, so I will leave just the Romantasy Instagram, and then from there you'll be able to find all the hosts. I know there's like the dark romance readers and the other people. I went with the dark romance team. The prompts that they have selected for that team I think are easily pickable from what I'm reading. So first up, we have the forbidden romance trope. Then we have the morally gray character, a book you're dying to get to, an activity prompt that will be involved in this vlog, and then the group book. So let's go over my TBR for the readathon. So first up, I will be attempting to read the Zodiac Academy, The Awakening. I have tried to read this before, and I think I got about 20% of the way through and I DNF'd it because of the writing. But I want to love this series, so I want to give it another chance and see how I feel. Everybody is aware of the story, and I've heard that it gets really good, and everybody I know really enjoys the series, so I want to love it too. So this will be the first thing that I read. Then I want to read Glint, which is the second book in the Plated Prisoner series. I read the first one in like September or October of last year, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like 4 stars, and I'm interested to see how the series goes. Again, I've heard this also gets pretty emotional and everybody loves it, and I'm always looking for a good fantasy romance series. Then I will be reading the group book, which is Court of Ravens and Ruin, which I had never heard of before, you know, this readathon brought it to my attention. All I know is I think it's a fae prince or something along those lines. I don't know all the tropes and things involved in these. I will then be trying to read The Bridge Kingdom, which is another popular fantasy romance. It is a enemies to lovers, I think, and she has to marry a prince of a rival kingdom. And then lastly, I will be reading Prince of the Sorrows, which this cover is 100% the reason that I picked it up. I think it's in like some sort of fantasy romance. I don't know quite what it is, but I think it's like human fae, something along those lines. I don't really know. We'll talk about it once I get into it. I'm going to get into Zodiac Academy, and I will let you know how I'm feeling once we're a little bit in. Very excited for this week, so let's just dive right into the vlog. So I am 95 pages into Zodiac Academy, and my initial thoughts are I'm enjoying this more than I did the first time, and I can tell that it's written by 2 different authors. I don't know if maybe like one of them took one storyline, one point of view, and one took the other, but one is more in depth than the other one is. So we have 2 sisters, Tori and Darcy, and in the beginning chapter, one of them is breaking into their old foster home to steal some money that they had stashed away there. The other one stolen a motorcycle and is trying to sell it. They are accosted by a guy. One of them is accosted by a guy outside of their apartment. He convinces them to let them into their apartment, and he tells them that they are the lost heirs to a fae throne and that there is this world called Solaria, and they need to go to the Zodiac Academy to not only get their inheritance but to take over as royalty. And for some reason they believe him, mostly because he uses some like influence, some magic on them to get them to go with him, and then he teleports them to Zodiac Academy, where we are introduced to a whole host of characters, but 4 heirs to the throne: Caleb, Max, Darius, Seth, and they are the captains of each different house that, you know, each person gets sorted into. So there is fire, earth, wind, and water. Fire, earth, wind, and water. And most people only have an affinity for 1. Some people have an affinity for 2. And of course our twins have an affinity for all 4. And they have to get sorted into specific houses. One of the sisters, I think Darcy, picks air, and then Tori picks fire, and they have to go through their own little initiation ceremonies. And Tori's initiation is definitely more intense. She picked the firehouse, and she has to like run over hot coals, running from this like Sphinx monster. She has to fight these like fire spirits, and then she ends up walking through a doorway and burning all of her clothes off to like add embarrassment to what she had to do. And then Darcy chose air, and all she has to do was they convinced her that all of the freshmen were being pushed off of the ledge of the tower that they lived in, and it wasn't true. And then they actually ended up making her jump, and so she jumps, and that's her initiation. They both feel the same, like the same characters. They're really indistinguishable. They haven't really set themselves apart personality wise, and the guys aren't like super distinct. We know that there are like magical creatures, so there's like vampires and werewolves and stuff like that, and I think the champion or whatever, captain of the air, which is Darcy, is a werewolf, because he's like has some werewolf tendencies going on. We haven't had that confirmed. And then I think the main guy of Tori's is a dragon, if that is like a thing that exists in this world. So it's not great. The writing isn't fantastic. The characters don't feel super distinct, but I do think that this is an interesting world. I'm enjoying it more than I did the first time, and I don't know if it's maybe just a, you know, different place, different time, different mentality. I was trying to read this in a point where I was a little bit downtrodden with my reading, where I felt like I had to be reading these really amazing stories that were like super impactful, and I wasn't allowing myself to have fun. So maybe just reading this at a time where I'm looking for that fun is really helping me. So at the moment I'm enjoying it, and I'm making it pretty quickly, you know, through it, and we'll see how it goes. I think I got further than this on my initial reread. I think I got 50% of the way through before I DNF'd it. And I don't remember exactly why I DNF'd it specifically. All I know is some of the bullying was a little bit immature. There's like varying levels of bullying, right? They're all immature, they're all ridiculous and over dramatic and silly, but this one in particular just didn't really make a lot of sense, and I was having a lot of issues with scenes making sense in general, like actions, characters, dialogue not making sense, and I'm not having that issue this go round. So I'm hoping that I will just be able to read it and enjoy it. But yeah, I'm making pretty good progress. Like I said, I'm almost 100 pages in, and I think it's only like 12 or 1 on Sunday, so I am optimistic for my TBR for the week. So I'm gonna come back to you again when maybe I'm 250 pages in and have some like more thoughts to let you know how I'm feeling. But at the moment, I'm optimistic that I will enjoy it and actually be able to finish it this time. So we shall see. Good morning, friends, and happy second day of the readathon. I am halfway through the Zodiac Academy, so I am here. I don't really have too many resounding thoughts about this. It's fun, and I'm getting through it. Like, that's really it. The sisters, again, I really haven't distinguished themselves in any way. The heirs are being douches. So basically, since we last spoke, they have just been kind of attending classes. The heirs have been bullying them. Tori has to become Darcy, I think. She has to study how to like learn the basics of being Fae with Professor Orion, and I think he's going to be her love interest in some way. And then we also have Tori, whichever one I didn't just say, is going to be studying how to use her magic with Darius, who is one of the heirs and also the captain of her order, or her house, or whatever. And then we also have the inclusion of orders, which is like the form that Faes take. So like I said, there is werewolves, there is vampires, there's unicorns, there is a bunch of different types of things that Fae can turn into to get powers back. So like the vampires drink people's blood to get power back, werewolves change into werewolf form, etc., etc. And they don't know what the girls are. Their mom was like a Hydra, or their dad was a Hydra, their mom was like something else. We've discovered two people that might possibly be working together to take the girls out. And also there's like a nymph rebellion. I think they're like lesser Fae. They're obviously like a different race, but they are, I don't know if they're necessarily subservient to the Fae, but like the way the nymphs were described was that they are in the shadow of Fae and they are causing issues. So there's like a nymph problem. Other than that, like not really anything has happened. Some bullying on Facebook has happened. Some like nude pictures were exchanged. Faculty doesn't really give a shit, and that's pretty much it. They are like the strongest Fae of all time, and they're kind of just like learning their powers. So I think I've gotten further than I did the first time, but I could see why I DNF'd it, because while it is easy to read and get through, I am like wondering what the point of having it be this long is. Like, it's not really that long. It's only like 420 pages, which is pretty short for a fantasy, but I'm wondering why it's that long, because there's just a lot of like stuff, and the stuff doesn't seem important. Like for fantasies where it's a lot of pages of them like training and stuff like that to like get better, I appreciate. But it doesn't, like, the stuff just doesn't really seem to be that crazy important. And I don't think that the dual perspective is really helping the story all that much, because like I said, the sisters are not distinguishable from each other, and I don't feel like the different points of view are doing much for like world building or plot development or anything like that a single point of view wouldn't have been able to do. It sounds like I hate this book because I'm just like sitting here and shitting on it, but like it's very readable, it's fun. This magical world, you can tell, is like very fleshed out. There's a lot going on. Like I said, there's like magical powers, there's elemental powers that like people fit into, there's Fae, there's different races, then there's also like subsections of Fae, like werewolves and vampires and stuff like that. So like this is a very expansive world, but there are other elements of it that are just like immediate elements that I have an issue with, and really they could be resolved by just like one point of view, I feel like, and like just better plotting. The writing is fine. Like, if you are a really big stickler for writing, you probably are not going to enjoy this, but it's just fine. Like, for some reason there's something about reading it physically that's making it easier to digest than the first time I read it, because I do remember the first time I read it I was struggling, and I feel like the writing was worse. So I don't know if it's been edited or what, but it definitely feels easier to read. Yeah, that's that. I'm gonna probably just finish up the book and come back to you. I know these books end on like a cliffhanger, but will I care about the cliffhanger is the question. This is not going to get anything more than a 3-star. I am enjoying it, but like I just said, for 8 minutes, I'm not enjoying every aspect of it. So we'll see how it goes, but I have not much left to go. I'm going to wrap it up and then come back to you with my final thoughts. Hello friends, it is the 5th day of the readathon, or something. It's Wednesday, and I finished this a couple of days ago, I think yesterday, and I didn't want to be on camera. So I wasn't, and then I didn't do a lot of reading after that. I finished this, and kind of as anticipated, I did end up giving this 3 stars. It was fine. I can see myself becoming invested in the series if I decide to continue. I just don't know if I will. I don't know if I'm invested enough in this like fantasy series when I know that there are other fantasies out there that I could really love. So who knows, maybe one day. I was like in it and I was very excited, and I was thinking like, oh, I need to go out and I need to get the second one to read immediately. But now towards the end, I just sort of lost it. And I know that like everybody says like get through the second book and all that other, or get through the first book and all that. But I have never subscribed to that mentality. Like if you want me to read your book series, then you need your first one to be good too. So, and then I also got about 40% of the way through Glint, and this is the second book in the Plated Prisoner series, and I'm going to talk about it you know, freely. So if you haven't read either of the 2 books, I'm gonna timestamp this book so that you can skip ahead to the next one, so you're not spoiled for anything. But this is the second book, and the first one I ended up giving 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I would say this is a very light romance so far, unless you consider the relationship with Midas romantic, which I don't. So the first one, we had Aaron, who was the played prisoner for King Midas, and she had been, you know, touched, and he turned her golden, and he kept her locked up in a cage in his kingdom, and then he was going to war against another kingdom, and he turned against his ally and took over that kingdom. And then about halfway through the book, he goes to that kingdom and sends a letter basically calling her and all of his saddles, aka his sex slaves, I guess, to that new kingdom. And so they are on their way, and they end up getting attacked by pirates, and they get taken hostage, and they get sexually assaulted and abused and stuff like that. And then the last portion of the book, she kind of fights back, and at the same time King Revinger ends up taking all of them hostage again. And King Revinger is a king of another kingdom, obviously, and he's said to be really brutal. Everybody's scared of him. He apparently has this power to like kill things and like bring rot to things, and everybody's scared of his immense power. And so we start this book, and she's like, you know, being held hostage by his army, and the leader of the army is Commander Rip, who is a fae, and it doesn't seem like anybody knows he's a fae. And it seems also like a war happened a long time ago that sort of like separated the fae from like the real world. I think either all the fae died or they went into hiding, so nobody really knows he's a fae but Orin for some reason. And they're kind of just traveling, and they're like treating her really well. She's found out that the saddles and the guards are being treated very well, and it's just not quite what she was expecting. All of the soldiers really love the king and the commander, and there's just like a lot of respect around being in his army and, you know, his kingdom and all that. And that's not really what she was expecting, because that's not the impression that she got. And then we also are getting the point of view of Queen Marilina, I think is her name, who is Midas's wife. So Midas was, I believe, just like a regular dude, and then he married the Queen Marilina because she didn't have any powers, and to take over the throne and rule the kingdom, she had to have powers, so she married him, and he obviously has powers. And now that he is in another kingdom, she has decided that's going to be the time to take her kingdom back. And so she basically like wears her old clothes, that because he decreed that all clothes has to be gold, and so she wore like a white dress with some fur on it, and she went and sat on his throne, and basically told everybody, I'm here to rule now, and you can either suck it up or... So I'm really enjoying both points of view. At the moment, I'm definitely enjoying Queen Marilana, whatever her name is, a little bit more, just because I like the moves that she's making, and travel and stuff is kind of boring for me. So Orin's point of view is a little bit stale, because we've been traveling for so long now, and we've just kind of just been sitting in one place for so long now that I'm a little bit beyond it. So throwing in the Queen's point of view is quite nice. So I will likely just update you when I'm done. I haven't started editing this vlog yet, but I think it's probably going to be quite long. And hi friends, it is Thursday, and this readathon is not going at all how I planned it. And you know, life just got in the way, and I'm hoping that I can read what I can. I want to at least start all of the books that I put in my thumbnail, because I can't make a thumbnail and then use it and then not read any of the books in the thumbnail, because that's why you came here for. So I finished Glint last night, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. So the first book to me is all very iffy. It's very mid, it's very like surface level. And then this one definitely focuses more on our 2 main characters, who I think are probably going to be the main characters for the rest of the book, and I think one of them is going to be the villain. It's definitely more character work than anything. We're focusing a lot on Orin coming to terms with who Midas is to her, what he's done to her, and also sort of falling for the commander of the 4th Kingdom's army, Commander Rip, who is a fae. We had some secrets revealed about Orin's identity, that were very interesting, that I really enjoy. And we also had some reveals about Commander Rip, and I just really like their relationship. I think he is a very different hero. Gotham. If you really enjoy heroes who are like really into badass women and love badass women and want to feel a lot of pride around women using their powers and getting stronger and learning to fight, you'll really like Commander Rip. This definitely feels like it's addressing the surface level things from the first one, and it's more about them working through their emotional issues. And by them I really just mean Orin. We do have the points of view of Queen Marlena, who I mentioned in my previous update. She is trying to take over the kingdom of Midas's. We'll take back her kingdom, rather. We don't really get her point of view that much. We kind of just get her meeting people and like swaying them towards her and stuff like that. And at the end we get this really interesting scene about her going around to her kingdom and like giving the poor people toys and stuff, because a good portion of her kingdom, despite Midas having this gold touch and living in this castle made of gold, his kingdom is quite poor because he has deemed the peasants below him and that he doesn't really need to have anything to do with them. And so she uses the peasants to sway them to her by going through and giving them like a loaf of bread and some coins and some toys for their kids. And there's a woman in the crowd who's like, what do you think this does? Like, y'all have ignored us for decades and now you suddenly are using us to get our affection. And it starts this like sort of riot in the like town hall area that she is hosting this event at, and she gets pissed. She's like, they're supposed to fall in love with me, this is supposed to sway them away from Midas, how dare they? And then she leaves. So I think she's going to be a villain later on. So we have Midas, who I think is gonna be, I have guesses about 2 villains that there's going to be. I think there's going to be like a mid-series villain, and then there's going to be like an end series villain, and I could be completely wrong. And if you've read the series up to this point and I'm wrong, go ahead and laugh at me in the comments. But I think Midas is going to be the mid-series villain, and I think Melina is going to be the final villain, because I think she's gonna come into powers in some way, because that's kind of like the thing with her, is like she didn't have any powers, and that's why Midas was able to take over her kingdom. And I have a feeling she's gonna find some powers some way or something like that, and I think she's going to be the series villain, or it's gonna be switched. But I really feel like Midas's comeuppance is happening because both of these women are like working to take him down in various avenues, or they're going to become lovers and they're just going to rule together, which would like be the ultimate ending, like a good villain arc for Melina, and then her and Orin fall in love and they kiss and we have them ruling together. That would be amazing, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. I'm going to make a comparison, and I don't like to compare things to this season, to this series, because I feel like everything is compared to this series. But if you like the character arc that Feyre from A Court of Thorns and Roses goes through in the second book, and the relationship that Feyre and Rhysand have, specifically about her powers, training, and like her, you know, overcoming her trauma and getting away from abusive relationships. If you like that aspect of Court of Thorns and Roses, I think you will like this. Again, I don't really like to compare things to A Court of Thorns and Roses because I feel like that's an easy comparison. It's a fae fantasy story. It's a huge series, so it's sort of like everybody compares it to that so that the book will get attention. But genuinely, as I was reading it, it reminded me of that. And if you didn't really like the first one, or you thought it was like very okay, I urge you to go on to the second one. It does have its faults. I don't think that Raven Kennedy used the point of view changes to the best of her ability. I don't quite know why she introduced the second point of view if she wasn't going to use it more, so I wish that she had used that more. I do think that the plot was pretty stagnant because Orin, while they are moving in different places, pretty much everything stays the same, and it's very focused on herself, so it doesn't really feel like a lot is going on, but it sort of builds this like slow simmering tension. And I had some other complaints while I was reading it, but I don't remember what they were. But yeah, so that's sort of my feeling on it. Anyways, I've now finished that book, so I think I'm gonna start Bridge Kingdom. I'm going to come back to you when I've gotten like 25% of the way through Bridge Kingdom, and hopefully I enjoy it, and two, hopefully I can finish it in the next couple of days, and we'll talk and hopefully redeem this video, because this first half of the week has just not gone to plan. So hi friends, happy Friday. I do have some reading updates for you, fortunately, because I know I have been not great this past week, especially not great when you're in a readathon, but I got 50% of the way through Bridge Kingdom. This is about Laura and Aaron, and in the beginning of the story, Laura is a sister of to 12 and or 11, and she is in the Red Desert, and she is being trained by her father to become the queen of this place called Ithaca. One of the 12 sisters is going to be picked, and in the first chapter we know that her father is going to poison whichever ones he doesn't pick. And he plans to pick one of Laura's other sisters, so she gives them a sleeping draft, all of them, and then saves herself, and then convinces her father, after he kills the staff and everybody, that they should burn the house down. And this gives her sisters an opportunity to wake up and leave the house and escape and get away, so they can live their life, you know, out of the yoke of their father. And her father is the king of, I can't remember what exactly the name of the city is, but in this world there is Ithaca, who is surrounding, or is in the middle of the north and south wards or something like that, and Ithaca has a long bridge that connects the two continents, and the bridge is held up on these separate islands, and Ithaca owns all the islands and owns the bridge, so they control all trade between all the kingdoms. And they have various alliances and stuff, and they had a treaty with Laura's father's kingdom that when the prince of Ithaca came of age, he would take a daughter of his, and that's how they would keep the peace, and like some other treaty stuff as well. So her father raises them up and then gives Laura as a bride with the intention of using her to spy on Ithaca, how to get into the bridge, how to use it, how to take control of it. And so she goes to Ithaca, she gets married to Aaron, and she's living on an island with Aaron and his sister Anna. And she's kind of just like learning Ithaca, learning their ways, trying to figure out how to get messages to her father. And she's also sort of like feeling this attraction for Aaron. Aaron is never wanted to be the prince. In Ithaca, it's whichever person was born first, whether you're a woman or a man, it doesn't matter. It's whichever child was born first. And Anna is his twin. He was born like a couple minutes later, and he never really wanted to be a king. He wanted to be a warrior or whatever. Whichever siblings isn't the king or queen, they are the commander of an army. And each island, I think there's like 10 islands, I can't remember the exact number, but each island has their own army, obviously, big or small or whatever. And Ithaca's people live, throughout these various islands, but there is one island that is protected, but they can't have all of their people there at one time. So like one island will get attacked and they'll send all of those people, or they think one island will get attacked, like they'll see raiders on the horizon in the water, so they'll evacuate all of their people to a different island. And there's like several months where the water is low tide enough, or high tide enough rather, whichever one, that their lands are accessible, so they have to move people from those areas into this one area for the season. And the one rule of Ithaca is that they aren't allowed to leave, because they want to keep what Ithaca has going on a secret, because Ithaca is very weak, really, because they don't have any imports, they don't have any exports of their own, they don't have any like manufacturing, they don't have any crops or anything like that. All they have is an army to defend themselves, and they rely on the other countries to provide them with food and livestock and everything, so that they can sort of support themselves. So the cities, I haven't quite seen a lot of the different like islands and stuff, so I don't know quite the state of Ithaca as a whole, but I think it's quite poor. You would think that Ithaca has a lot of money because they control trade in this world, but I think a lot of the money is given to various islands to kind of sustain themselves. So Aaron's focus is to make sure that Ithaca stays safe, and to evacuate people as needed, and also fight off these raiders that show up from other kingdoms. And there's multiple kingdoms, but there's like one in particular that he has like he had a treaty with, but they're now attacking because he married Laura. And so he's really like, his whole purpose is to help Ithaca, obviously, because he's their king, and like figure out a way to keep them safe. And his mom had this idea of like uniting everybody and coming to like a real peace treaty that would allow their people to leave and them not feel like they have to safeguard the secret. And so he wants that's like his eventual goal. But his dad didn't want that. His dad really instilled in him that he needs to keep them safe, that Ithaca is everything, and he needs to do whatever it takes. And that includes killing people that try to leave. There's a lot of moving pieces in the story, but I think the author is doing a good enough job making it all work together and revealing it in a way that keeps things interesting and also like makes sense, and it's not world or info dumpy, which I'm appreciating, and I'm really liking Laura's character. I think when you imagine like a badass heroine, that's Laura in my opinion. She constantly uses potions, she knows poisons, she knows like what her strengths are, what her weaknesses are. She's very trained, she's very intuitive and intelligent, and she's very sneaky. She is like what every woman assassin in a fantasy romance or in a fantasy wishes they could be. She's very strong, and each character feels very like internally motivated. They all feel very fleshed out, and I can see them as characters, which I'm appreciating, and I'm really enjoying it. I think it's a good fantasy. There is a very light sprinkling of romance. There was a scene where Laura in the beginning puts a sleeping draft in Anna and Aaron's drinks the first night, and she's like searching their rooms and stuff, and she's searching Aaron's room, and he wakes up, and so she like puts the sleeping draft on her lips, and then like kisses him, and then hopes that he will think it's a dream. And so this immediately sparks like a sexual interest in each other, but they haven't really done anything. He said some like great things to her about just like his admiration of her, but nothing too romantic has happened yet. We've seen some fledgling jealousy and like possessiveness, but not too much, which I'm appreciating because I like a little slow burn in a fantasy. I don't even know if they get together this book, because I know this is a series and I think each book is about them. I could be incorrect, but yeah, I'm really enjoying it. And then I'm also about 20% of the way through The King of Sorrows, I think is what it's called. And this one reads very much like a fairy tale. Like I feel like I'm reading a Grimm's fairy tale. The writing is impeccable. It is about Saffron, who is a human living in a fae world. And in the beginning of the story, we get the idea that he is about to be sent off back to the human world by his patron, who's essentially the person that's like funding for him to be there, and he doesn't want to go back to the human world, so he wants to get a scholarship to stay at the school that he's at, and he wants to work at his patron's winery. We have a couple of scenes of him with his village people kind of introducing us to his life, and then he's in the woods, and he's searching this like sprite area, this area where the sprites live, because they have stolen some trinkets and things, and he finds some rings. He runs into a fae, and they are also looking for a ring, and Saffron gives them the ring, and he finds out that this ring used to be a prince's ring, and it can make a fae do whatever you want, and so he kind of tricks that fae into giving it to him, and then the next day he's at the school and there's a new students moving in, and he figures out that fae is the one that is moving in, and it's also someone that he adores because that fae does art, or does like writes, and he loves his books. So he's now like freaking out because he knows that he pissed this fae off, and he's trying to figure out where to go. And it's very whimsical, very fantastical, very much reads like a fairy tale, and I'm really enjoying it. And then I also started the other one, the group book, Something Wings and whatever, and this feels the exact opposite. It feels very juvenile. Okay, if things look different, I'm sorry, my camera died, but I am not really liking this too much. The writing feels very juvenile, and everything that I read, some reviews that I read said YA, some said new adult, which like new adult is like the high end of what you would consider YA, so like 18, 19, 20, just depending on whether we're talking about publishers YA or actual young adult. Anyways, and we have our heroine who is a human, and she lives in a world that's not super well understood by me. I'm only a couple % of the way through, so you know that could change, but she seems to be a human who is marked for having magic. She was born with like a rune on her arm and on her back, meaning she can make gold, and she has been apprenticing for a guy that makes gold staves or stabs in general, which is how the Fae in this world access their powers. In the city that she lives in, it's a court, and it's run by Fae, obviously. It's a Fae court, and it is like the Court of Gold or something like that. And there's a bunch of different courts, and one of them is the Court of Shadows. And in the beginning of the book, the heroine is going to be sold, not sold even, just like taken by a Fae courtier or a prince or some shit like that, and he's very brutal, he's very cruel, has a bunch of women lined up, and one of them backsasses him, so he like bashes her head in, and then he chooses the heroine because she has the Fae rune, she has the rune on her body, and told that she needs to pack her shit and they're gonna come back for her, so she decides to run. That's as far as I got. I'm not too interested in it. I think I'm gonna put it on the back burner, and then if I finish the other two and have time left, I will give it a shot, but it's just not immediately gripping me. Like with the Bridge Kingdom, the writing is good, the story is interesting, I think the characters are well done. It starts with a bang. It starts with you thinking that Laura has poisoned her sisters, and so it starts off very strong. The other one, The King of Sorrows, starts off very strong. It's very lyrical, very beautiful, very fairy tale-esque, very descriptive. It almost has this like cozy element to it. So I'm definitely enjoying those two more than the other one. So we'll see if I get to that one. I'm going to try to finish Bridge Kingdom and get like 50% of the way through King of Sorrows before I update you again. I'm not quite sure how long this video is going to be, but it is kind of what it is, and I'm happy to. I've just been very chatty because I haven't vlogged in a while and I've just missed it. So I'm going to come back to you when I have read some more. I'm 83% in, and we're about to have a declaration of love, possibly, but definitely our first sex scene, and I can feel the betrayal coming. I know what's going to happen. I was hoping what was the conflict wouldn't be the conflict, but it was the conflict, and it hurts. You're balanced rather precariously, so let's see how this goes. But I ended up finishing the Bridge Kingdom, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I'm very interested to continue the series. I liked the way that it ended, and the conflict, while annoying, I think sets up for a good transition into the rest of the series, and I like the relationship. The most important part of a fantasy romance is undoubtedly the romance. I don't quite see the more like fantastical elements yet. I'm hoping that'll come in later in the series, but I really enjoyed it. I think it was what did I read for this video so far? It was like a sliver bit, like the smallest bit above Glint, because I really enjoyed parts of Glint, and then there were other parts that I just didn't really like all that much. Whereas Bridge Kingdom, I enjoyed pretty much everything. It just didn't have like those 5-star feelings for me. So That's why I didn't get a 5-star, but I super enjoyed it. And I am also like 40-ish% of the way through The King of Sorrows, and I really don't have that many feelings about it. Both the heroes have had more intimate interactions with each other. So Saffron is the human, and they made a deal that because Saffron knows his real name, the Fae's real name, he can control him. So he wants to cut his tongue out, and Saffron says, I'll make a deal with you where you won't take my tongue, I'll keep your name a secret, and you will allow me access to the Fae library in their school that humans don't have access to. He ends up like reneging on the deal. He keeps the secret, but the Fae prince doesn't show up to let him into the library, so he follows him to a party, and the Fae prince is like super drunk, and he makes him sit between his knees all night and like feed him stuff. And that's pretty much it. It's starting to drag. I'm starting to notice the lack of things going on in the story, and compounded with the very flowery writing, it's sort of becoming a little bit of a drag, but the story itself is pretty short. I think it's only like 360 pages. So I'm hoping that it'll pick up somewhere along the way, and it's not just this like low stakes, this like low plot story. Because I like character work in fantasy as long as the first one establishes the world and the characters and stuff like that, and we don't have nothing happening in the first one, if that makes sense. I would prefer the second book being a lot of character work. So I'm probably just gonna finish King of Sorrow unless I have something like really fantastic to say before then, and then just update you with my thoughts on it, because it's not something that I'm like in love with. If it improves, I could see it being a 4-star, because like I said, the writing and all that is really spectacular. Just the other elements I'm not really enjoying. I will say I am enjoying like the very cruel Fae Prince situation. Like it's giving very much like Cardan energy, but way meaner, way crueler. And it doesn't seem to be for like a purpose, kind of like what Cardan does in The Cruel Prince. So I'm going to finish it and update you when I'm done, and then we will get into the last book. It's still Friday. I don't have any plans today. My partner and I are probably going to do a date night tomorrow. So I'd like to get both the books done between now and then, so that I can kind of just have my weekend to finish some other books that I need to get done. I'm trying to finish like 6 books between now and Sunday, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm gonna finish this one. We'll be back, and then we'll finish the group book. One thing I did forget to mention is that even though the writing is quite like lyrical and fantastical, it is incredibly dark. There is a lot of abuse going on. There's a scene where the main character like gets in trouble for something, and they carve things into his back. So like the fairies are very mean. They definitely are not good to the humans. Like they definitely do some fucked up stuff to humans. But still the writing is very like fairy tale-esque. So I would akin it to like old fairy tales that are very dark and like very like the original like Fae lore, where it's very much they're horrible and mean and cruel. That sort of energy. Okay friends, let's talk about the last 2 books for this video. So I finished The King of Sorrows, and I decided not to rate this. I don't want to dissuade anybody from reading this book because it is sort of a departure from the typical fantasy romance in the genre. It is MM, and it's just very different. And I don't want to sway anybody away. I personally did not enjoy the story. I think the writing was focused so much on the descriptions of the world and the surroundings of the main character, but that there was a lot lacking in the way of character emotions, character dynamics, character growth, relationship growth, all of that. There was definitely a very fast transition from this like really cruel bully relationship to being enamored with each other, and the story did not balance plot and romance very well. And if you are going to be a fantasy romance, I want those plots to be sort of equal to each other as much as you can, or at least have both of them be strong elements to the story. So I am definitely not the typical opinion for this story. I see 5 stars across the board when I go to Goodreads, so I definitely don't want my opinion to dissuade you from reading it if it sounds like something that you would be interested in. And then I also ended up DNFing the group book, and for all of the reasons that I cited previously. It's very immature, it felt very childish. The heroine had the markings of a character that is obstinate for no reason, and the attempts to make her seem like badass are just really her being very dumb, making not smart choices, and not reacting in a way that I feel like is believable in some of the situations that she's put into. So it's just a miss for me. But overall, I think this was a great video. I got to start several series and continue several series that I really enjoyed and that I look forward to continuing later on. I loved participating in this readathon, and I'm really happy that I did. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, what you read for the Romanceathon readathon. I would love to know. If you did not participate but you have nothing to say, leave a fairy emoji down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you are looking for more content from me, you can check out my Instagram. You can also check out my podcast Instagram. You can also check out my podcast on all your favorite streaming platforms. It is a horror podcast. It's a lot of fun. Don't forget to subscribe if you're looking for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in my next one.